Ship Island is the collective name for two barrier islands off the Gulf coast of Mississippi, part of Gulf Islands National Seashore. East Ship Island and West Ship Island. Hurricane Camille split the once single island into two separate islands in 1969. West Ship Island is the site of Fort Massachusetts, as a third system fortification. History: having the only deep water harbor between Mobile Bay and the Mississippi River, the island served as a vital anchorage for ships bearing explorers, colonists, sailors, soldiers, defenders and invaders. The French, Spanish, British, Confederate and Union flags have all flown over Ship Island. French explorer Pierre Lemoyne d'Iberville charted Ship Island on 10 February 1699, which he used as a base of operations in discovering the mouth of the Mississippi River. The island served as a point of immigration to French colonies in the New World. Some immigrants died upon arrival at Ship Island, and their bodies were burned in a furnace. In 1702, the island was named Isle of Aso due to its protected deep-water anchorage. After New Orleans was founded to the west, the island served as the principal port of entry from Europe for French colonists from 1720 until 1724. The island was given to Great Britain by France at the end of the 7 Years' War in 1763. In 1783, at the end of the American Revolution, Great Britain transferred the island to Spain. The United States, as part of the Louisiana Purchase, claimed the island in 1810. In the War of 1812, Admiral Sir Alexander Cochrane anchored between Ship Island and Cat Island with a fleet of 50 British warships and 7,500 soldiers in. Preparations for the Battle of New Orleans and the island was used as a launching point for British forces. In 1849, the U.S. Navy anchored at Ship Island to discourage assembly of mercenaries on nearby islands for paramilitary invasion of Cuba. In 1853, the island's first lighthouse was built. It was made of brick and mortar. In 1858, Mississippi passed legislation that gave jurisdiction over the island to the United States government. After the war, Congress approved an ambitious plan to construct state-of-the-art masonry fortifications at strategic locations along the Atlantic and Gulf coasts, including Ship Island. Construction of a fort on the island began in 1859 and continued up to the Civil War, when the Confederates named the uncompleted structure Fort Twiggs after Confederate General David E. Twiggs. The island later became a prison for Confederate prisoners of war and a base for the U.S. 2nd Regiment, a unit composed of African-American soldiers. On July 9, 1861, a 20-minute cannon exchange between Confederates in Fort Twiggs and the screw steamer US Massachusetts occurred. Ship Island was abandoned by the Confederates because it could not be adequately garrisoned. The US Massachusetts returned and took possession of Ship Island in September 1861. According to the historian John D. Winters, the island was a valuable base from which to break up the traffic of the small Confederate vessels plying between Mobile and New Orleans through Mississippi Sound. In 1862, the fort was renamed Fort Massachusetts in honor of the Union warship which had seized the abandoned outpost. Construction on Fort Massachusetts was halted in 1866, although the fort was not fully completed. The January 4, 1862, edition of Harper's Weekly describes Ship Island. Ship Island was occupied by the advance guard of General Butler's expedition on 3 December. The troops consisted of the 26th Massachusetts and 9th Connecticut Volunteers, under command of Brigadier General Phelps. They left Massachusetts in the steamer Constitution. Their embarkation was duly illustrated in Harper's Weekly at the time. On 3D Inst. As we said, they arrived at their destination, landed, and occupied the island without molestation. It is understood that they are to be followed by other troops, on whose arrival operations will be commenced against Mobile and New Orleans, or both. The following account of Ship Island will, with our illustrations, enable our readers to understand the importance of the movement. Ship Island is situated in longitude 89 degrees west and a little north of latitude 30 degrees north, and is the property of the state of Mississippi. It is about 60 miles from New Orleans, nearly the same distance from the Northeast Pass at the mouth of the Mississippi River, 40 miles from Mobile, and 90 from Fort Pickens. It lies between Horn Island on the east and Cat Island on the west, and is distant about 5 miles from each. Some 10 or 12 miles to the north, on the mainland of Mississippi, are the towns of Biloxi, Pascagoula, and Gulfport. These towns are favored summer resorts for the wealthy planters and merchants of the Gulf states, and, in consequence of a bar off the shore, are now the places of refuge for rebel gunboats. Ship Island is somewhat undulating, and extends in a slight curve about 7 miles east-northeast and west-southwest. At West Point, where the fort is located, the island is little more than 1/8 of a mile wide, and is a mere sand spit, utterly barren of grass or foliage of any kind. This eastern end, or East Point, is about 3/4 of a mile in width, and is well wooded with pine, cedar, and live oak. The whole island contains a fraction less than 2 square miles of territory. Excellent water can be obtained in unlimited supply by sinking a barrel anywhere on the place. The great advantage of this is too palpable to require comment. The island possesses a very superior harbor, into which 19 feet can be carried at ordinarily low water. It is situated north of the west end of the island. The anchorage, with water equal to the depth on the bar, is 5 miles long, and averages 3¼ miles in width. The harbor is safe for the most dangerous storms in the Gulf, those from the eastward, southward and eastward, and southward, and might be easily entered during these storms without a pilot, if good lighthouses were placed in proper positions. The rise and fall of the tide is only from 12 to 14 inches. Fort Massachusetts, of which we give an illustration, is thus described in the Herald letter. This fort, which is situated on the sand spit at the extreme western end of the island, is nearly circular in shape, somewhat resembling a pear in form. As I have stated elsewhere, its construction was commenced by the federal government, and when in a state of considerable progress was burned by the rebels, who afterward rebuilt and then abandoned it. It is of brick, and rendered bomb-proof by sandbags placed 5 or 6 feet deep in front of the walls. The rebels built 11 casemates, and our forces have built 2 more since they have occupied the fort. The casemates are bomb-proof. The fort is at present but 1 tier high. It is provided with Dahlgren's 9-inch shell guns of very heavy caliber and in perfect order, and they are hourly expecting 16 more very heavy guns from Pensacola. Besides this, Captain Manning's battery have landed 5 of the steel-rifled cannon with the Sawyer projectile. There were 6 of these guns on board the Constitution, but unfortunately one of them was lost overboard in removing them from the transport. It is hoped that they will be able to recover it, as a buoy floats right over the spot where it fell. In 1880, the island was designated as the country's first quarantine station. The fort closed in 1903, and the quarantine station was placed on reserve status in 1916. In 1886, a wooden lighthouse was built to replaced the 1853-built brick lighthouse that was damaged by waves. During World War II, the Coast Guard used the island for anti-submarine beach patrol. In 1942, the Army Air Corps used the quarantine station as a military recreation facility, as did Keesler Air Force Base in 1955. In 1969, Hurricane Camille with its 30-foot tidal surge cut the island into two separate islands, to form East Ship Island and West Ship Island. The gap is known as the Camille Cut. East Ship Island is mostly vegetation and wildlife, while West Ship Island is a tourist destination. In 1972, the original 1886 wooden lighthouse was accidentally burned down by campers. In 1998, Hurricane George washed away a mile of East Ship Island's beach. In 1999, Friends of Gulf Islands National Seashore dedicated a commemorative reproduction of the 1886 wooden lighthouse. In August 2005, Hurricane Katrina almost completely submerged East Ship Island. West Ship Island received most of the damage as Katrina's 30-foot tidal surge wiped out the visitor and employee facilities on the island as well as the island's pier and boardwalk. These facilities included offices and sleeping quarters for National Park Service staff, public restrooms and showers, and the public concessions building where visitors could purchase most items found in a regular convenience store. Fort Massachusetts received minimal damage and was soon reopened to the public. The pier and boardwalk were rebuilt as well. Currently, temporary restrooms and a small concessions trailer are on the island while new facilities are rebuilt. Unfortunately, the 1886 commemorative reproduction lighthouse that was dedicated in 1999 on the island was reduced to rubble. In 2008, Ship Island was surveyed just 2 weeks after Hurricane Ike. Scientists had a difficult time finding the island. The eastern half of the island had completely disappeared, leaving only parts of the western half. It is unknown whether the island was eroded by Hurricane Ike, or more likely Hurricane Gustav that hit just 2 weeks earlier. In April 2009, rebuilding of the island's ranger station, restrooms, visitor center and snack bar that Hurricane Katrina washed away began and was scheduled to be completed in the fall of 2009. As part of this rehabilitation, parts of Fort Massachusetts damaged by Hurricane Katrina are also being repaired. In June 2010, containment booms encircled the island in an attempt to protect it from oil leaking from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Activities. Today, West Ship Island serves as a tourist destination. Activities include fishing, swimming, and tours of Fort Massachusetts. Access. East Ship Island is accessible only by private or chartered boat. West Ship Island is accessible through private or chartered boat. It is also accessible by a privately owned ferry boat company, Ship Island Excursions, running from Gulfport, Mississippi 12 miles out to the island for a fee. Ship Island Excursions has been running boats at the island since before the National Park Service acquired the island. Today, they are an official Park Service concession.